Welcome to the Ask Brad Show. And today we got a couple of special guests. We got Tommy Anderson and Mr. J.R. Brooks. And Tommy, you want to introduce yourself real quick?
Yes, hello, I'm Tommy Anderson with Home Care Assistance here in Huntsville, Alabama. Our office is located in Hampton Cove.
And Mr. Brooks, just a little bit.
I am a retired lawyer and has lived in Huntsville except for when I was in law school and in the Army and then when I served in the Justice Department.
So you're one of the rarities of being a native of Huntsville.
One of the rarities of this area, because when I moved into Huntsville, there were about 13,000 people that lived here.
Wow. So you've seen it grow up.
I moved it in. My parents lived out in the county, and then we moved into the Huntsville in, I believe, 1954.
Wow. Well, today, the subject we're going to talk about today is near and dear to many people's hearts. And it's a subject that everyone needs to be talking about because healthcare, when you're retired, sometimes even before that, when it comes to debilitating illnesses that require ongoing assistance, that is a subject that a lot of people need a lot of education on. And just to give you a little background in myself, I'm, of course, president of Brad Williams Financial Retirement Income Source, and been doing this business for plus 35 years. But something happened in my life in the late 90s that caused me to pivot in my career, and that is my grandmother got Alzheimer's and went through a lot, and the family went through a lot, and it caused me to recognize the fact that this is an issue that affects millions of families and individuals. And so I started focusing on that. I had been involved in the insurance and financial services industry and pivoted for some time into exclusive long-term care. I worked as a representative for long-term preferred care, which was a nationwide company that focused on long-term care insurance and education. And so I had a lot of extensive training in that, which was indispensable and has been for my last 25 years, because at that point I shifted my focus of my business from just normal age, working age, to people who were at or near retirement. And that long-term care experience has really helped me over the years, because I know a lot of individuals who sell long-term care insurance, provide a valuable service by doing so, but they may not really have the in-depth knowledge that is important to understand what that insurance does. I've been doing it 25 years and have seen the results of the plans that I've put in place for people and how that has really helped them in their lives and their quality of lives and their finances. And today, the reason I brought these two gentlemen in here is Tommy focuses on providing the care, and JR, because you asked me to call you JR, he is a client of Tommy and his firm. And so, Tommy, why don't you just give us a moment of maybe how you got into this?
So thanks, Brad, for allowing me to be here to share a point that is really critical where we are today with long-term care insurance, with the need of in-home care support. So a little history behind us as a company. My wife and I, parents aged, and they needed care support, which we found that was inadequate with what they was receiving, and we felt a need to try to make a difference. How could we help someone else go through the hurdles of all the trial and error with private people, different companies looking for support? So we started Home Care Assistance here in Huntsville. And from that, we try to focus on how we can help individuals age in place, maintain their dignity, and thrive equally.
Good.
So with that, one of our disciplines of methods of payment is the long-term care insurance.
All right.
So with long-term care insurance, Brad mentioned his 25 years engaged in the awareness of it and so forth. We too are purchasers of the long-term care insurance. And one thing that a lot of people overlook is the long-term care insurance is an investment to protect your financial assets as you age, because instead of depleting what you've saved for your longevity of life, this long-term care insurance supplements it.
Correct.
And it helps people where when you do need the help at the level you need it, you have insurance policies such as the long-term care insurance to help you get through it without depleting what you save for your financial longevity and support. So that's how we got into this arena of in-home care support, and part of the discipline is the long-term care insurance.
Okay. And so as you've dealt with so many clients, tell me some of the hurdles that a lot of people have had to overcome when they first encounter the fact that they're going to need in-home care, and some of those issues you've had to deal with.
So hurdles. I think one of the biggest hurdle we see immediately is a person acknowledging they need the help.
Okay.
People are independent and they live their lives independent for a long period of time. And when they are injured or limited to mobilities and fine memory concerns, because we also focus with Alzheimer's and dementia, which could be used through the long-term care policy for the support. But people sometimes don't realize they need the help. And that's the first hurdle, is when a person is not sure they should implement a policy or allow someone to come into the house because of their privacy or concerns or denial of where they are. That's a big hurdle.
And I know in my experience, one of the issues that people need to recognize is it's not so much whether you have insurance or not. It's when you have these issues of the chronic illnesses that come typically with age, how are you going to pay for it?
Right.
So there are some people that have the assets that would allow them to be able to provide for their own care, and they can do that out of the earnings they get or the assets they've accumulated. And then others may have accumulated a decent amount, but it would severely impact their lifestyle if they had to be using that for long-term care. And one question that I used to get a lot from people who would respond to our marketing information, and they really didn't have anything to protect, and they were asking me, do I need long-term care insurance? And I was like, well, really, long-term care insurance is to protect your assets. It is to provide the care you need, but it's there to protect the assets. And so if you don't really have any assets to protect, then maybe long-term care insurance isn't what you need to be looking for, because you don't need to be eating beans and rice so you can afford a policy. Okay. So I wanted to get that out because we're going to mention insurance a lot. But I think one of the hurdles that I've seen my clients overcome is they want to put off using it. And so they sacrifice a lot of quality of their care because they're not wanting to drain it, because typically they have some limit that's usually years. You have 3 or 4 or 5 years of care that you can get once it starts. So tell me about some of the hurdles in that area that you've had to overcome.
Sure. And with the hurdles with when to initiate the long-term care policy, one of them is family members that has the policy really forget how to initiate the policy. That's a hurdle, because if most of us may have received that information 20 years ago, and when it's time to initiate, where's the policy? What's the number? Who's the company is with? How do I initiate that policy? Those are hurdles. And for us, we help with that. First, we ask, who's the company you're with? And do you have a policy number? Do you have a phone number?
Right. And I know in my experience, keeping up with industry publications, there's been good press and bad press, like there is with anything about long-term care insurance, and some of the problems people had getting claims paid and things like that. And I wanted you to shed some light on the fact of claims process, because what I found in my experience, it's not that the company doesn't want to pay you. It's just that they want you to check the right boxes. And guys like you who provide the service you do help them over those hurdles, correct?
Absolutely. And how to process the claim. That's another hurdle. So,
because when you're dealing with an insurance company, you're dealing with paper pushers. And so they're in a bureaucracy, and they want everything, all the boxes checked before they make the next move.
absolutely. And what we do is we make it transparent for the family member with the long-term care policy, transparent to the fact that when we come in as a company providing the support, we automatically align our ADL, the activity daily living requirements that meet the long-term care policy requirements. We align them so that we have at least 3 out of the 5 required areas covered. From there, we process all the documents weekly.
And those, when people hear activities of daily living, when it relates to a long-term care policy, you have basically bathing, dressing, eating, toileting, continence, and transferring.
And ambulation.
Okay. And so if you qualify for any 2 or more of those, that triggers benefits under your policy.
Absolutely. And that's what we do. So we submit those documents weekly based on what our care plan aligns with.
Okay.
And then once we get our care notes and the invoice, we submit them for the family member. And since we've been submitting our documents, we have 0 error. And if we have a defect, we mitigate it quickly so that we can resolve the family concern about reimbursement of payments.
Yeah, and some people say, well, the insurance company's doctor may not let me start, but tell them the process of that, because it's really
Perfect.
your doctor that initiates it.
And that's a great point. People misunderstand home health with in-home care. See, with home health, it requires the Medicare, Medicaid doctor approval to receive it. That's how it's paid. With long-term care insurance, a family can say, I'm ready to initiate it, and they make a decision from there through the need at the family and communicating with their policy holder, stating, I'm ready to initiate it.
And JR, let me bring you in here, because you being a client of Tommy's company, how easy was it when you first started working with them to initiate your claim and get it all done?
Well, for me, I don't think it was very difficult, because I knew the company to which we had been paying premiums, and I had their address.
Okay.
It was pretty, I began paying premiums on long-term care for me and my wife when we were probably in our late 50s or early 60s.
Okay.
And so it became necessary when my wife was looked for assistance, when my wife was in her early to mid 70s.
Okay.
So we began initiating it, and I initiated it, and they asked, requesting the benefits, and so they sent a nurse out to us to go through exactly what
To do an evaluation.
do an evaluation, and we began using home care assistance even before the nurse came there, because there was a period of time in which I had to pay for it myself, and
Right.
a brief period of time, about a month. And then thereafter, after the nurse provided a report, and the company decided that the benefits were called for.
Well, and there's another part of that satisfaction of a policy, that understanding the language of your policy is very, very important, because when it comes to a long-term care policy, you have the daily or monthly benefit amount. You have the benefit period, which is once that benefit starts, how long would it last uninterrupted? Because if it's interrupted, the clock stops until it starts again. And the elimination period, which is that deductible, instead of in dollars, it's in time. And so one of the things that I've seen through my career is that people confuse calendar day elimination period with days of service, because different companies have different language. So if you're on a calendar day elimination period, if you have, once you file a claim, the clock starts ticking from that day forward, regardless of how much care you're getting at the time. But if you have a service day elimination period, they're going to be counting the clock down for that 30, 60, or 90-day elimination period, which is your typical range from that service day. And it's every service day that counts toward that elimination period. So Tommy, why don't you give us some insight into what I was just saying?
I agree 100% in what you shared, because that's the second hurdle that we see when it comes to initiating, is what's the elimination period and understanding the policy of it. What's their daily amounts? How much is the value of that policy? And that elimination period varies from company to company as to what it really is, whether it's the service day or the calendar days, and understanding that. So you're absolutely correct with that elimination period concern.
Yeah, and this is where having someone like Tommy and having an agent that's engaged on a regular basis to help you explain, or to help explain to you the language. And in fact, in reality, when you bought the policy, that should have been really detailed to you, because the agent has different options with different companies and they're all different. But it really boils down to the language of the policy. That's all about insurance, is the language. And you being an attorney, you know exactly what I'm talking about.
That's one of the things I did. I knew the company. I didn't retain a copy of the policy. I didn't have it, so I contacted the insurance company by telephone and requested a copy of my policy.
That was great.
And actually, it had changed. The ownership of our policy had changed from one company to another a couple of times. So
Right.
And so they sent me my policy language so that I knew exactly what my rights were, and those were the ones I asserted.
Good.
And I would say, though I may disagree to some extent, but something you said earlier said, if you don't have assets, you may not need the policy. Well, the problem with that is, even if you don't have assets, your children may, and then they may have to bear the burden.
And that's a very good point, Jay. That's a very good
So
point.
this is something I didn't want. And so, fortunately, I had assets to protect too, but even if you don't, just remember that when and if this occurs to you, if you don't have it, then somebody's got to pay if you get adequate care. And it may turn out to be your children if you don't.
You're exactly right. Yeah, I used to kid with my daughters that they say be kind to your children because they're the ones that pick your nursing home. And I used to tell them, well, I have long-term care insurance. I'm going to pick my own nursing home, But, and let's talk about where care is given, because this is an important thing to consider. Statistically, through the years, and it's stayed fairly consistent, it'll vary by what study you look at, but about 60% of all care is delivered in the home. Mm-hmm. About 25% of this custodial care is delivered in an assisted living, and really only about 15% of people collecting from their long-term care or even paying for long-term care is actually in a nursing home. Shed some light on that.
Absolutely. And what I love about the option for long-term care is when you age, the areas you thrive best in is at home.
Right.
And it's beautiful that you have that option to be at home and receive the level of care in a familiar surrounding so that you can have quality based on the one-on-one aspect. So it's 100% correct. based on where we look at the percentages. Now, it may vary, but it's very close to that number at home, and most people thrive. That's what we seek when it comes to in-home care and the quality of care. People thrive better because it's one-on-one and is tailored to their need so that they can do the best, live the best, have the best portion of their life toward that period of aging and sometimes at end of life. And also with hospice.
Right.
So the long-term care policy goes right into the transitional period with the hospice support. So you can use it from a medical situation that you require support all the way to end of life. And most people that use it at a high percentage at home.
Yeah, and there's two aspects to it. You've got the home and community care, because a long-term care policy will typically pay for, say, adult daycare if that's needed, home care, adult daycare, and then, of course, facility care, which would either be assisted living or in nursing homes. Now, assisted living, just to clarify for those who may not understand it, that's for those people who are somewhat independent for some things, but require daily assistance for others. All right, so it's not like independent living where you go to a retirement home and you're playing games in the afternoon and it's just a structured living. Assisted living is there to provide care for you or your spouse. And so then the nursing home is when you require 24 hours. So what Tommy does is he's in that home aspect of it, which is where the bulk of all care is delivered. So we talked about the elimination period. We talked about the language in that. So let's start with the claim's been filed. They're getting care at home. They've contracted with you for your services. What happens next?
We're in the home providing support.
Right.
And we have already agreed that it'll be under the long-term care repayment process. So when we provide the care, we build a specific care plan for that individual that covers, as we mentioned, those activity daily living requirements. And we have the period that we submit them. Our company does it weekly.
Okay.
So once we complete the period for that week, person in our office extract those care notes along with the invoice that has been cleared through the billing process.
All right.
We send that as a packet. It'll be the invoices cleared with paid, the care notes for that period that aligns with that invoice, and I submit them to the long-term care company so that they could process those days in support for repayment or those days in support of the elimination period that we mentioned.
Yeah, and some people think, well, I've got long-term care. Let me just pay one of my family members to take care of me. And that's a trap a lot of people fall into. Family, in a lot of policies, family members can be paid, but they have to be licensed and they cannot live in the home. So you can't just pick a friend or a family member and use your long-term care policy for that unless you have that language written in your policy, which is very expensive when you take that policy out. That's an indemnity policy versus a reimbursement policy. So we've gotten to that claims initiation. Go ahead. You interjected.
So one thing that's neat about what Brad is sharing about the family member. So when it comes to the long-term care companies, they require specific information that is captured during the care support. So having a laid out care plan that's consistent with their requirements for the ADL that they need to see for justification of repayment. So that is a big process that they have to do. So if you have a loved one that's assuming the role as a caregiver and trying to file the long-term care policies, it's a high probability that they don't have what they need to validate the repayment process because of what the insurance company is requiring. I just want to make that.
And that's a good point, because the value added of using a company like yours saves a lot of headaches, denials, all kinds of issues that could come up because most likely you've already encountered them in your experience and you already know how to address them. Right.
That's correct. And I can use JR as an example. When we first started, it was a glitch in having a single person processing it at the insurance company area. So they had multiple people, as an example. They had multiple people that was processing the documents I was submitting, and it was delaying the repayment to JR. So I remember he was asking me, so what's going on? So what I was able to do was pull up all the records archived for the submission of them. And together he would call them on it and say, hey, I have it where it was submitted, and I would have it on my end. And when they finally aligned, then we mitigated any of that delay again. So again, having a company that can archive and walk through the process, because I was able to help with Mr. Brooks so that we can hone in on it and mitigate that issue.
And it's like using a map in a way. Having a guy like Tommy is like having a GPS where it anticipates the things that are ahead. If you handed my wife, no offense to my wife, she's a great lady, a map and ask her to navigate her way somewhere, she wouldn't even begin to know. It's right there in the map, but she doesn't know how to use it because she's never really had to. She lived in a small community and in most of her life. But having that GPS, she can pretty much go wherever she wants. And so I'm an old map guy from all my life. But having that GPS, especially in a new place, is a phenomenal benefit. And that's where Tommy comes in, is you're that care GPS, right?
Absolutely. When I need a lawyer, I go to a lawyer.
Right.
When I need a person that's going to do my plumbing work, I go to a plumber. So my point is, we're the people that make it easy for you to receive what you need because we've experienced it. We do it daily. We're aware of the processes and requirements, and we know the language.
Right.
Because that's the other piece, is speaking the language that the insurance company people are saying. Sometimes it may go over your head if you're not used to that language.
Right.
Asking the right questions.
Which
so
could result in a delayed claim.
it will always result in delay because you don't understand what they're asking.
Right.
So for us, we try to make it easy. One, we get the details from the family. What's happened? Give me the document as a copy so we can see. And then we will follow up with the insurance company and ask them those questions. Why did you submit it? What are you saying you're missing? What is it exactly you're missing? And then we could pull up our records and cross-check it.
Well, and so here we have, we've talked to you about, again, the elimination period, how a policy is basically structured, the initiation of a claims process. But I think the most important thing, those are all just mechanics of the foundation. What the most important thing is the care being delivered. And JR, if you would give us some insight into the types of care that your wife has received and how valuable that's been to you.
Okay, well, my wife's cognitive issues are not a problem. And so she is perfectly able to know everything and do everything, know what should be done.
Okay.
And so she directs a lot of it herself.
Okay, good.
But physical has some physical issues. And so what they do is help her make sure she doesn't fall and to go from room to room to, as you mentioned, some of the other things that could be delivered, right? That's with dressing and other things like that, and drive her where she wants to go. And
so she's able to retain a lot of her independence because she's got that standby assistance.
Oh, absolutely. She has book club that she attends, and she has physical therapy that she goes to, and she has another club that she goes to each week. And she goes out to lunch from time to time with a very close friend. So she can do those things with assistance.
And you brought up a good point when you mentioned cognitive, because a policy is paid on one of two levels, possibly both, but at least one of two. And that is those activities of daily living, the bathing, dressing, eating, toileting, transferring, those type of things. But the cognitive part is when you have some kind of organic brain issue, dementia or Alzheimer's or something like that, where they're not able to function, or maybe they can partially function, but they don't know, they can't remember to take their meds, or they just forget a lot, or you really can't trust them in the kitchen, that type of thing, because they're going to walk off and leave the burner on. So understand that you don't necessarily have to qualify on both counts. You might qualify on the physical aspect of it, or you might qualify on the cognitive aspect of it.
Well, my wife would not qualify on the cognitive side at all, but she does physical.
Okay. So, Tommy, why don't you tell us a little bit of some of the things you've done for people on the cognitive side?
Sure. We specialize in Alzheimer's and dementia.
Okay.
So what does that mean, or what does it look like? So when we come in, first of all, we match our caregivers to the need of the client at the level of the need.
Okay.
So if we have a person that is early stages of forgetfulness, we have a caregiver that's skilled at that level. If we have a person that's in stage 4 where they've lost some of their motor skills and their abilities to have any type of continence awareness for toileting and things like that, then we will assign a caregiver at that level. Bathing, dressing. We also implement, based on the abilities and interests of the individual, engagement activities, which are brain boosting type situations. Whether it's puzzles, whether it's cards, whether it's conversation, whether it's scrapbooking, pictures, walking out and playing who's who. Things like, I Spy, whatever it is to stimulate the individual, we can engage that into a care plan at the level of their capability.
Well, and in our conversations in the past, you've also mentioned that you like to match the caregiver's personality to the client patient's personality. And we all know that if you like somebody, it's a lot easier to deal with them, and you get over a lot of hurdles because of the comfort that comes with the trust, because trust is a big issue in what you're doing. Why don't you talk about how that works?
And thank you for bringing that up. When individuals are at a point of decline, confidence, trust, being aware of an individual plays a big part. So our model is to match a caregiver based on that experience, that skill set, and that personality. Do they have the temperament to match the individual so that it's a great fit up front? And I say great, we shoot, and we have a really high percent of first-time matches a great fit. And if that doesn't work, then if a person is slightly off from what the individual need, then we can assign another caregiver. And that caregiver that is the match becomes the primary.
Okay.
And from that comfort and trust, they know the patterns, the things that they require, and they become an extension of a family member. So we have caregivers that can look at an individual and see that they haven't eaten, and they make suggestions to eat, and the person goes along with it because they trust the individual and they have that relationship.
Right.
Big piece of it.
Okay. So let's talk about trust.
So with trust, our caregivers gain the trust, and they become like family. The clients begin to see them as an extension of that family member. They trust that they're asking them to do the right thing. They trust to be able to do things in comfort, in private, like bathing or toileting, or even engaging in activities. They become an extension of that family member as a caregiver, so that the family knows, both the ones, children or whoever's watching their family, have a peace of mind knowing who it is, because that member trusts our caregiver. And then the loved one that we're caring for trusts them as well.
Well, and one thought I've always had is if I needed care and I've got to have some of these intimate things, toileting and things done, and I needed help there, I really would rather a professional do that for me than engage my daughter to do it, just from a dignity standpoint, So I can understand it. So JR, why don't you inject here? Tell us some of your thoughts on the value you've gotten from Tommy's services and what it's meant to you and your wife.
Well, it's meant a lot to my wife to be able to have some measure of independence, but it means a lot to me as well because, for example, without the help, I wouldn't be here right now. And
you'd be engaged.
And after this, I have a civic club meeting to go to, and then after that, this afternoon, I have a meeting at the community college, and so it makes me more independent, and it makes her more independent.
Good. Well, so we've talked about the process of getting a policy, what the policy language is, and how important it is to understand that, what's covered under the policy, how you engage the services, the process through that. So let's finish up with, obviously, we all reach that time in our lives where we pass on. And so, Tommy, talk about your services once someone starts into that transition period.
So one thing we are as a company, we're partners to the community.
Okay.
So we have home health companies. So a lot of times we have that misunderstanding, home health opposed to in-home care. So in-home care is non-medical support. Home health, as we mentioned, Medicare and Medicaid, there's a nurse involved and the doctor under that program initiated. So for us, we're partners. So when we see a decline that is coming into picture, if we have wound care requirements, if there's mental concerns of cognitive decline, even if it's declining in health hospice requirements.
Okay.
We have partners within the community that we trust and we work with. We may make a recommendation. Here's a company we worked with and we know well that we can partner with if they choose that. So if they choose those companies, we already have accountability because we're accountability partners.
Sure.
And we help with that decline. So with hospice, they come in as an example to do the hourly visits, the requirements that they need, but we're there to do the continuation of support. If a person is bedbound at that time and they need their full care, we give it all. And we give all that care support to end of life. So we partner together to make it easy on the family because, again, this is a new area that they're walking into.
And it's a very difficult time.
It is. And, family members have to be focused a lot, not to say that they don't focus on the loved one, but it's the post-life of that loved one that they have to take care of.
Mm-hmm. Well, and one thing, too, to always remember, that one statistic, you may have an updated statistic, is about 40% of caregivers end up needing care because they get worn out. And I know I've seen that in my experience. So having a plan of action, whether you have insurance or not, and understanding the ramifications of all these things we've talked about today are critical. And Tommy, do you have any closing thoughts?
Yes, thank you. So I would like to share, we talked about a lot of different areas within that long-term care framework. A lot of it was about in-home support. I want to make it known that you can use long-term care policies in communities, assisted living, independent living, memory care. You can use that long-term care insurance.
Adult daycare.
Adult daycare, yes. And the last thing is we have a tendency sometimes to overlook when to initiate care, not just long-term care, but care in general. So
even if somebody were to reach out to you and say, I'm not sure, that's where you could come in.
That's right. And the things that I will say from experience is for the family members that go home during the holiday, just like Thanksgiving, and you haven't been home in 6 months, as an example, to visit your mother, your father, and you see that bills are stacked up. You see they've lost a lot of weight. You see a lot of old, outdated food in the refrigerator. You see that the house is not the way it used to be that you remember. You see dings all over the place in cars or bills piling up. Those are signs that something has changed, and it's time to look at it. When you're behind the power curve is when you get a call saying your mother was outside or your father was outside at the middle of the night and we had to take them or apprehend them for safety, or that they have fallen and they've been falling a lot, but you haven't addressed it. So those are the signs that you waited too long, but just pay attention to the cues in advance.
And JR, what closing thoughts do you have about all we've talked about today? What would you like to tell our listeners about the whole process?
Well, I'll say that getting long-term care insurance was one of the better decisions I've made.
Okay.
Not the best decision. That's deciding to marry my wife.
There you go.
We've been married 55 years now, so
Congratulations.
But some other decisions in career were good decisions, but that was one of the better decisions financially, because what is the situation now is that, well, we do have assets, but our assets are not being depleted because of the payment for the long care assistance provided by Tommy's company and paid for by the insurance company in large measure. I pay some of it myself, but and mostly by the insurance company.
And a long-term illness is one of those things that it ripples across the whole, your whole life, like a pebble in a pond. I mean, it just goes in all directions. So, Tommy, as we close, would you tell people how to get in touch with you and what the best way to get in touch with you, maybe your website, phone number, that type of thing?
And thank you for this opportunity again, Brad, to be here. If you need information or commitment, whichever it is, you can reach me at my phone number. Direct cell is 256-535-3658. My office cell phone number is 256-716-9940.
Could you repeat those again, please?
Yes. So my personal cell is 256-535-3658, or my office phone number is 256-716-9940. You can also look at us or reach us in our website at Home Care Assistance Huntsville.com.
All right. Mm-hmm. Well, I want to personally thank both of you. Tommy, you're a good client, and I just see a lot of value in what you do. And JR, I appreciate you taking the time out of your life to come here, because so often people need to hear things like this from someone who's experiencing it, not just pros in the industry. So again, thank you both. And we'll be visiting with y'all soon.